My name is Alexa, and until 2 years ago, I thought my biggest accomplishment was the medical license I had worked 10 brutal years to earn. What I didn't know was that the man I loved would one day weaponize that very license to try to destroy me. If you've ever dated someone who looks perfect on paper, charming, ambitious, too good to be true, and ignored the tiny alarms in your gut, then you'll understand how I ended up here. But back then, I wasn't thinking about red flags. I was thinking about how good it felt to finally be loved by someone who seemed to see me. I met Daniel at a fundraising gala for the hospital where I worked. He wasn't a doctor, he worked in healthcare consulting, but he moved through that ballroom like he owned it. Tall, neatly dressed, smiling like every person he shook hands with was his long-lost friend. When he turned his attention on me, it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. We spent hours talking that night. About our careers, about burnout in medicine, about how hard it is to date when your schedule is nothing but 12-hour shifts. He asked thoughtful questions, remembered little details, and never once glanced at his phone. By the end of the evening, I found myself giving him my number without hesitation. Looking back, that was his specialty, mirroring exactly what you wanted to see. At first, Daniel was perfect. Flowers delivered to my apartment, surprise dinners, a weekend trip after only 3 months of dating. He had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. My friends noticed it too. Finally, one of them said, "A man who treats you the way you deserve." But little cracks appeared almost immediately. The first time he sulked was when I canceled dinner because an emergency surgery ran over. He told me, in this quiet, wounded tone, "I just feel like you'll always choose your job over me." I apologized, reassured him, promised to make it up to him. The second time was at a friend's birthday party. I laughed a little too long at someone else's joke. And on the way home, Daniel said, "You know, people notice when you flirt." I hadn't been flirting. I was literally talking about a Netflix show. But the way he said it made me doubt myself. By the 6th month, the charm was carefully rationed. Affection if I bent to his moods. Silent treatment if I didn't. And the worst part? I started to adjust. That's how covert narcissists get you, not by storming in with abuse, but by weaving it slowly into the fabric of your life until you can't tell where it begins and where you end. Still, I stayed. Partly because of hope, partly because of fear, and partly because I was so damn tired. I'd spent my 20s grinding through medical school and residency, surviving on caffeine and adrenaline. I wanted love to be simple, something I didn't have to fight for. It wasn't. I'd been offered a fellowship in a prestigious program across the country. It was the kind of opportunity that could open doors for the rest of my career. I told Daniel with nervous excitement, expecting him to be proud. Instead, his face hardened. "So you're just going to leave me here?" he said flatly. "It's a year," I said carefully. "We could make it work." "Long distance?" He laughed, bitter. "You expect me to sit around waiting while you go chase another title? What about us?" That night he cried, begged, said he couldn't live without me. The next morning he was cold, accusing me of being selfish. The cycle repeated for weeks, love-bombing, guilt-tripping, threats. When I finally told him I was going, that my decision was final, his mask slipped completely. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," he said, eyes blazing. "And don't think you'll just walk away from me. I don't let people throw me out like garbage. It should have scared me more than it did. Instead, I just felt numb." I left anyway. The first few weeks after going no contact were harder than I expected. My phone lit up with messages, pleading, then angry, then eerily sweet again. He left voicemails in the middle of the night. "I can't live without you. You'll regret this. I'm sorry, please come back." I blocked him everywhere. Changed my number. Told friends not to give him updates. For the first time in years, I slept without my chest tightening from anxiety. I ate meals without someone commenting on my choices. I felt free. I thought I was safe. 2 weeks into my fellowship, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Dr. Alexa Monroe?" The voice said briskly. "This is Investigator Harris with the State Medical Licensing Board. We've received multiple complaints regarding your conduct. We need to discuss these allegations immediately." The words didn't make sense at first. "Allegations? Conduct?" He went on, his voice clinical and detached. "The complaints reference substance abuse, boundary violations with patients, and professional misconduct. We'll be opening a formal inquiry." I remember gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "That's impossible," I managed. Who filed these?" "I'm not at liberty to disclose that at this stage," he replied. "You'll receive documents by mail outlining the process." When the call ended, I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing. My heart wasn't just pounding, it was trying to break out of my chest, and then, like puzzle pieces falling into place, I knew. Daniel. Of course it was Daniel. The timing. The accusations. The way he always hinted he could ruin me if I ever left. I had thought the hardest part was leaving him, but I was wrong. Ending the relationship didn't stop the abuse, it transformed it. And this time, he wasn't after my heart. He was after my career. The letter from the licensing board arrived 3 days later, thick enough to make my stomach clench before I even opened it. Inside were formal documents stamped with the state seal, outlining serious allegations requiring immediate response. I skimmed the accusations, each line more surreal than the last. Reported evidence of excessive alcohol consumption impairing professional duties. Possible inappropriate relationship with a patient. Concerns regarding emotional instability and inability to maintain professional boundaries. It read like a script written by someone who knew exactly how to hit the most damaging points. Daniel. I felt the air drain out of me. This wasn't just a breakup tantrum. This was a calculated attack. I barely slept that night, sitting at my desk with the papers spread out, highlighting key phrases like I was back in med school. I knew the truth, that I'd never once touched a patient inappropriately, that I rarely drank more than a glass of wine, that my evaluations from supervisors were stellar. But truth doesn't always matter when your reputation is under review. Medical boards operate under one principle: protect the public at all costs. That means any complaint, no matter how flimsy, triggers an investigation. And the longer an investigation drags on, the more suspicion it creates. The next morning, I called my mentor, Dr. Patel. She listened quietly as I explained, then sighed. "Alexa," she said gently, "these things can get ugly. You need to lawyer up immediately. Don't try to handle this alone." Hearing her say it out loud made me feel both validated and terrified. The following weeks blurred together into a haze of stress. I hired an attorney who specialized in professional defense. He was blunt. "We'll fight this, but you need to understand. Your ex knows exactly how vulnerable this system is. False complaints can still cost you thousands in legal fees, months of sleepless nights, and the shadow of suspicion." Meanwhile, Daniel's messages found ways through. Even with new numbers and blocked accounts, mutual acquaintances would slip up. He'd send emails from burner addresses. Some were pleading, "Please, let's talk. You're ruining us." Others were venomous. "I told you, you can't just walk away from me. You'll regret this." Each message was proof, but also poison. At night, lying in bed, I'd replay every word he'd ever said. "I don't let people throw me out like garbage." I had dismissed it as anger in the moment, but now it was a prophecy. The psychological warfare was almost worse than the legal one. I started doubting myself. What if the board believed him? What if colleagues heard rumors and assumed the worst? In medicine, reputation is fragile. One whisper of misconduct can trail you for years, even if proven false. And then came the collateral damage. A nurse I'd worked with for months suddenly became distant. A fellow resident avoided eye contact. At first I thought I was imagining it. Then I overheard fragments. "Heard she's under investigation." And my stomach dropped. This was Daniel's real power. He didn't need to prove anything. All he had to do was plant the seed of doubt. By week 3, I understood what researchers call the extinction burst. When a narcissist loses control, they don't fade quietly. They escalate. First the emotional theatrics, then the rage, and finally, when nothing else works, they target what you value most. Daniel had moved methodically through each stage. I had ignored his late-night sobbing voicemails. I had blocked his furious texts. I had shut down every avenue of manipulation. And so, he had gone nuclear. He wanted me back in his orbit, or destroyed. One night, after another long day juggling fellowship duties and legal prep, I opened my laptop to draft my formal response to the board. As I organized my evidence, performance reviews, supervisor letters, proof of clean background checks, I stumbled across an email from a colleague. Subject line, "Are you okay?" The message inside made my blood run cold. Daniel reached out to me. He said, "You've been struggling with alcohol and might need support." I didn't know if it was true, but I thought you should know. It was like being punched in the chest. He wasn't just filing official complaints. He was working behind the scenes, poisoning my professional circle, whispering lies into ears that mattered. That was the moment the fear hardened into something else. Rage. I started documenting everything, every email, every voicemail, every message from a friend saying Daniel had contacted them. I saved it all. I created a binder, then a second one when the first overflowed. I printed screenshots, highlighted dates, cross-referenced timelines. If Daniel wanted war, I wasn't going to cower. I was going to build a fortress of evidence. My attorney noticed the shift in me. "Good," he said, when I handed him a stack of organized documents. "This is how we win. You let him dig his hole deeper while you stay calm and collect everything." Staying calm wasn't easy. Inside, I was still breaking. My appetite disappeared. I lost weight. My hair started thinning from stress. Some nights I sat on the bathroom floor clutching my phone, fighting the urge to call him just to make it stop. But each time, I reminded myself, giving in now would only feed the monster. The worst part came at the end of week 4. I received notice of a formal hearing scheduled 2 months later. Until then, I was technically allowed to continue my fellowship, but under the cloud of investigation. The board had also contacted my supervisor to notify them of the complaints. Walking into work the next day felt like stepping into a courtroom where everyone had already heard whispers of the case. Smiles were tighter. Conversations paused when I entered the room. Daniel had achieved what he wanted: isolation. But what he didn't know was that isolation had a side effect. It made me sharper. It gave me time to think, to plan, to channel every ounce of fear into preparation. He thought he was dismantling me. In reality, he was forging the weapon I'd eventually use against him. The hearing notice felt like a death sentence written in bureaucratic language. Black ink on heavy cream paper, words like mandatory appearance, alleged misconduct, sanctions including suspension or revocation. I had fought through medical school on 3 hours of sleep, clawed my way through residency while my body screamed for rest, and survived nights of holding dying patients' hands so their families wouldn't have to say goodbye alone. And now, after all of that, one man's lies threatened to erase me with a pen stroke. I should have been furious. Instead, for the first few days, I just felt hollow. My fellowship director, Dr. Chen, called me into her office after receiving the board's notification. "I need you to understand," she began carefully. "This doesn't mean we think you're guilty. It just means we have to follow protocol." I nodded, eyes fixed on the diplomas framed behind her. "Of course," she hesitated. "Alexa, I've always respected your work. But medicine is political. Even if these allegations are proven false, people may—" She stopped, choosing her words. "They may remember the rumor longer than the truth." That was the cruelest part of Daniel's weapon. Truth and lies don't weigh the same. Lies spread faster, stick longer. The board required me to submit a written response to each allegation. My attorney and I spent hours drafting carefully worded rebuttals, attaching performance reviews, letters of support, and evidence of my spotless record. But paperwork didn't silence the whispers. At lunch one day, 2 fellows at the next table spoke in hushed tones. "Heard it was about a patient." "No way, Alexa. She doesn't seem like the type." "Exactly. That's why it's so shocking." They froze when they noticed me standing behind them, tray in hand. I forced myself to smile, as though their words hadn't just carved into me. "Mind if I sit?" I walked out, appetite gone. The stress manifested physically. I developed insomnia so severe, I'd lie awake until dawn, mind replaying every possible scenario. The board believing Daniel, my license revoked. Years of sacrifice gone. One night at 3 a.m., I stared at the ceiling and thought, what if this is what he wants? Not just to ruin my career, but to break me until I can't function? Because deep down, I knew it was true. Daniel didn't just want me unemployed. He wanted me destroyed, dependent, crawling back to him for salvation. That realization sparked something inside me, a tiny ember of defiance. I decided to investigate Daniel as thoroughly as he had investigated me. I knew he was reckless with his digital footprint, always bragging, posting, oversharing. I began compiling screenshots of his social media, noting inconsistencies. For example, one of his complaints accused me of frequent intoxication impairing patient care. Yet on the same date, he claimed I was visibly drunk on duty, his own Instagram. Stories showed us having dinner at a vineyard, where he was, the one guzzling glasses of wine, while I sipped sparkling water. Another allegation involved a supposed romantic entanglement with a patient, except the patient he named in vague terms was, in fact, a 68-year-old woman I had treated once in the ER. I had documentation to prove it, piece by piece. I started assembling a counter-narrative, evidence that not only disproved his claims, but suggested deliberate fabrication. A colleague forwarded me an anonymous email that had been circulating. "Do you know who's treating your patients? Ask Dr. Monroe about her drinking problem." Another friend admitted Daniel had approached him at a networking event, spinning stories about how I was unstable and headed for a breakdown. Each time I heard another lie, the ember inside me flared hotter. This wasn't just about saving myself anymore. This was about showing Daniel, and anyone like him, that I wasn't prey. I walked into the conference room wearing the sharpest suit I owned, hair pulled back, binder of evidence clutched like armor. Across the long table sat 3 investigators, their faces unreadable. One began reading aloud. Multiple complaints allege that Dr. Monroe displayed impaired judgment due to substance use. How do you respond? I slid a document forward. These are my hospital performance reviews for the last 3 years. Each explicitly notes no concerns with professionalism or impairment. Another investigator asked about patient boundary violations. I handed over treatment logs, carefully anonymized. The only patient who matches the description in the complaint is a 68-year-old woman. Here is the record of her single visit. For every accusation, I had a rebuttal, calm, precise, documented, but inside, my heart hammered with every word because no matter how thorough I was, I couldn't control their perceptions. I couldn't control the shadow Daniel had already cast. After the meeting, my attorney leaned over. You did well, but this isn't over. He'll keep filing, keep pushing. People like him don't stop until they're forced to. I knew he was right, and that meant I couldn't just play defense anymore. I had to go on the offensive. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed 3 words at the top: the case against Daniel. It wasn't just about proving him wrong. It was about proving him dangerous. I started mapping everything. His threats, his voicemails, his contradictory statements, the friends he'd manipulated. The timeline of our breakup perfectly aligned with the sudden surge of allegations. I cross-referenced the dates of his complaints with evidence of my whereabouts. I highlighted patterns, like how each new complaint followed shortly after I ignored one of his desperate messages. Slowly, the narrative took shape. This wasn't the story of a troubled doctor. It was the story of a spurned ex-partner weaponizing the regulatory system for revenge. In the process, I noticed something else. Daniel wasn't careful when he lied. His arrogance made him sloppy. One complaint claimed I had shown up drunk to a hospital shift on a Friday night. Except hospital records showed I had been off that entire weekend, attending a conference, where I'd signed in digitally, time-stamped and verifiable. Another claimed I had confessed to drug use during an argument. But the only argument that matched his description had happened over text, and I still had the messages. In them, he accused me baselessly, and I responded, "That's insane. I've never touched anything like that." Each contradiction became a weapon, but building a case took its toll. There were nights when the weight of it all crushed me. I'd sit at my kitchen table surrounded by papers, tears blurring the words, whispering to myself, I can't do this anymore. Then I'd remember the look on Daniel's face the night I told him I was leaving. That cold, dangerous smile as he said, "You don't get to throw me away," and I'd wipe my eyes, pick up my pen, and keep going. One unexpected ally emerged during this time. Dr. Patel, my old mentor. She invited me to coffee one morning. "I've been through something similar," she admitted quietly. Not the same details, but the same pattern. Someone trying to weaponize the system against me. It nearly broke me. "Don't let it break you." Her words were a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. I realized something else too. Daniel thrived on isolation. He wanted me cut off, doubting myself. By reaching out for support, I was already taking back power. The official investigation loomed like a storm cloud. Every day I balanced fellowship duties with legal prep, exhaustion with determination. But beneath the fear, a new resolve crystallized. Daniel thought he could erase me with lies. What he didn't understand was that I had spent my entire adult life fighting uphill battles, through exams, through sleepless nights, through impossible odds. He wasn't my first challenge, and he wouldn't be my last. When the letter from the licensing board arrived, I thought it was junk mail. It wasn't until I saw the seal and my full name in bold print that my stomach flipped. The complaint listed everything he knew would cut deepest. Allegations of drinking on the job, crossing patient boundaries, even stealing medications. Lies, every single one of them. But when you're licensed, even lies get treated like truth, until you prove otherwise. I sat at my kitchen table with the letter in one hand and my phone in the other, shaking. My ex had cried, begged, threatened, but none of it worked. Now, this was his nuclear option. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I opened a new folder on my laptop and labeled it Defense. I started pulling everything. Text messages where he admitted to drinking himself sick, screenshots of him harassing me, emails where he threatened to ruin me if I left. I even printed bank statements showing I hadn't touched alcohol or bought anything suspicious. The rage that hit me was sharp, but strangely focused. I wasn't just defending myself. I was building the case that would burn him down. The investigation started with interviews. A stiff man in a suit called my office, then my references. Every time the phone rang, my stomach lurched. But I kept my binder close, over 200 pages of timelines, screenshots, and proof. When they finally questioned me, I didn't ramble or cry. I just laid it out, his threats to destroy me if I left. The dates he texted versus the dates he claimed I was using. Friends and colleagues who swore under oath they never saw me drink or cross a line. The investigator's face didn't move, but I saw the flicker, the one that says this isn't adding up the way the complainant wanted. Meanwhile, my ex kept pushing. He sent anonymous emails to my boss, left voicemails at 3 a.m. pretending to be concerned colleagues. What he didn't know was that every call, every email, was traceable. And I was saving it all. I stopped feeling like prey. For the first time, I realized I was flipping the script. He thought he could weaponize the system. I was turning the system into my shield, and maybe my sword. The day of the board hearing, I walked in with my binder clutched like armor. He showed up too, smug, dressed sharp. With that fake concerned partner act he used to fool my friends. But here's the thing about lies. They crack under pressure. When the board asked about his proof, he had none. Just dramatic stories, vague timelines, and crocodile tears. Then my lawyer slid my binder across the table. Every contradiction laid out in color-coded tabs. Texts where he said I'd pay if I left. Emails where he admitted to drinking himself into blackouts. Voicemails threatening to call my hospital until I caved. The board members leaned in. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were staring at him, and for the first time I saw it. The slip. His face twitched, his act cracked, and the charm that once fooled me fell flat in that sterile, fluorescent-lit room. When the session ended, the board didn't just clear me. They issued a statement that his allegations were malicious and unfounded. That record would follow him if he ever tried this again. I walked out lighter than I'd felt in years. He thought he'd ruin me. Instead, he built the paper trail of his own downfall. News travels fast in small professional circles. By the next month, people weren't whispering about me. They were whispering about him. Turns out, filing false complaints against a licensed professional isn't just petty. It's criminal harassment. My lawyer filed a counter-complaint, attaching the same binder of evidence. Suddenly, the man who tried to erase me was explaining himself to investigators of his own. He lost his job within weeks. HR didn't like the idea of employing someone under investigation for malicious harassment. His landlord didn't renew his lease once the late-night police visits started. Neighbors had been reporting his screaming fits for months, and the friends who once thought I was too harsh for cutting him off, they saw the truth in black and white. Most blocked him. A few even apologized to me. Revenge didn't look like some grand, fiery showdown. It looked like silence, me thriving while his own lies caved in on him. The man who wanted me erased was now the one invisible. It's been a year since that hearing. My license is spotless. My practice is thriving. I even mentor younger women in my field now, because if there's one thing I learned, it's that silence can kill you faster than lies. Do I think about him? Sometimes, not with fear anymore, but with clarity. He wanted control, and when I refused to hand it over, he tried to scorch the earth around me. What he didn't understand was that I wasn't playing defense. I was documenting, building, waiting. Revenge didn't come from screaming back, or showing up at his door, or stooping to his level. It came from patience, from truth, from letting his own poison expose him. If anyone reading this is in that dark place, wondering if you'll ever get free, wondering if they'll ever stop, I promise you this. The moment you stop reacting and start preparing is the moment you take your power back. My name is Alexa. He tried to take my career, my reputation, and my future. Today, all three are still mine, and his? Gone.